The air in our apartment felt heavy that evening, thick with the kind of unspoken tension that lingers after a laugh dies too quickly. I stood by the kitchen counter, slicing tomatoes for a salad, the knife's rhythm a steady counterpoint to the hum of the city outside. Nathan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his broad shoulders relaxed, his dark hair catching the glow of the lamp. We'd been together for 5 years, tethered by a love that felt unshakable, until it wasn't. My name is Rose, and this is the story of how a single, careless jest unraveled everything I thought I knew about us. Nathan and I met on Tinder, a spark from a swipe that ignited into something real. We were both 26, fresh out of the same college, our lives intersecting like lines in a sketchbook. He was kind, attentive, the kind of man who'd hold your hand in a crowd and check if you got home safe. I thought he was my forever, the one I'd marry, the one who'd stand by me no matter what. But comfort breeds complacency, doesn't it? You start to believe the person you love will always forgive, always stay, no matter how sharp your words cut. That night, we were bantering, tossing playful jabs like we always did. The conversation turned to some trivial thing, a coworker's bad date, a movie we'd watched, and I leaned into the moment, my voice light, but edged with mischief. "You better watch your back, Nathan," I teased, smirking as I tossed a tomato slice into the bowl. "I might just leave you for someone with a bit more spine." It was a throwaway line, meant to sting just enough to make him laugh. He chuckled, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a shadow that didn't match the curve of his smile. "You'd never leave me," he said, his tone almost too steady. "Oh, I just might." I pressed, leaning closer, my words dripping with playful venom. "You're too weak sometimes, Nathan. A bit of a simp, always bending over backward for me. Keep an eye on me, or I'll slip away." I laughed, expecting him to fire back, to keep the game going. But the room went quiet. His face hardened, his jaw tightening like a spring coiled too tight. The air shifted, a subtle chill settling between us. I'd struck something raw, something I hadn't seen before. His silence wasn't just hurt, it was a warning. Looking back, I see how cruel my words were. Nathan had always been my rock, cooking dinners after my long shifts, cleaning our apartment without complaint, paying for things when my paycheck fell short. He earned more than me, a fact we never dwelled on, but his generosity was a quiet constant in our life. Our friends used to tease him, calling him whipped, and he'd laugh it off, his arm around me, proud to be mine. But I'd taken it for granted, hadn't I? I'd let myself believe his devotion was unbreakable, that I could poke at his pride without consequence. The next morning, the shift was palpable. Nathan left for work without his usual kiss goodbye, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. I brushed it off, telling myself he was just tired, that we'd laugh about it later. But the days that followed were different. His texts, once constant and warm, dwindled to curt replies. He stopped asking about my day, stopped checking if I'd gotten home safe. The protective warmth I'd grown to rely on, his hand on my back in crowded bars, his voice on the phone when I was out late, vanished. It was like he'd pulled a plug, and the light between us flickered. I tried to ignore the growing distance, convincing myself it was temporary. Maybe work was stressing him out, I thought, or maybe he was just in a mood. But deep down, I knew it was my words. That careless jab about him being weak had landed like a blade, slicing through the trust we'd built. I missed the way he used to hold me close, his presence a shield against the world. Now, I felt exposed, like a tightrope walker without a net. Had I pushed him too far? Had I broken something that couldn't be fixed? Our apartment, once a haven of shared routines, became a battleground of silence. Nathan used to love cooking, filling our home with the scent of garlic and herbs, his laughter mixing with the sizzle of the pan. He'd clean without being asked, knowing how much I hated scrubbing dishes. But now, the kitchen stayed empty, the sink piled high with unwashed plates. I tried to pick up the slack, but my efforts felt hollow. The joy we'd found in those small acts was gone, replaced by a quiet resentment that seeped into every corner of our life. I confronted him one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of guilt and frustration. "Nathan, what's going on? You're not yourself." He looked at me, his eyes cold, distant, like a stranger wearing his face. "Maybe you're just seeing me clearly now," he said, his words sharp enough to cut. "Maybe I'm tired of being your simp." The word stung, thrown back at me like a weapon. I tried to apologize, to explain that I hadn't meant it, but he waved me off, his expression unreadable. You said what you said, Rose. Own it. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized how deeply I'd wounded him. My playful teasing had exposed a fault line in our relationship, one I hadn't known was there. But worse, I sensed something darker, a shift in Nathan, a calculation in his silence. He wasn't just pulling away, he was planning something, weaving a web I couldn't yet see. And I was about to learn that a single spark, carelessly thrown, could ignite a fire that would consume everything we'd built. The days bled into weeks, each one heavier than the last, as if time itself was conspiring to pull Nathan and me further apart. Our apartment, once alive with laughter and the clink of dishes, now felt like a museum of what we used to be. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the occasional creak of the floorboards under Nathan's measured steps. I'd catch glimpses of him moving through our space, grabbing a coffee mug, folding laundry with mechanical precision. But he was a ghost, present yet unreachable. My playful jab, those careless words about him being weak, had opened a chasm, and I was starting to realize I might never bridge it. Nathan's withdrawal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was surgical, deliberate. He used to be my anchor, always checking in, his texts a steady pulse of care. Home safe? Or need anything from the store? Now, my phone stayed silent, the screen a blank reminder of his absence. I'd send him messages, light ones, like how's your day? Or miss you. But his replies, when they came, were clipped, devoid of warmth. Fine. Busy. Once, I called him after a late shift, hoping to hear his voice, but it went to voicemail, his tone flat and professional in the recording. It felt like he was erasing me, one unanswered message at a time. The change wasn't just emotional. Nathan had always taken pride in our home, turning mundane chores into acts of love. He'd cook elaborate dinners, his hands deft as he chopped vegetables, humming softly to himself. He'd scrub the counters until they gleamed, knowing how much I loathed cleaning. But now, the kitchen was a graveyard of dirty dishes, the trash overflowing with takeout containers. I tried to keep up, dragging myself to the sink after work, but the dishes piled faster than I could wash them. The apartment felt like it was decaying alongside us, each neglected task a brick in the wall Nathan was building between us. At first, I welcomed the space. Nathan's attentiveness could be overwhelming, his constant check-ins sometimes bordering on suffocating. I'd roll my eyes when he'd text me in the middle of a girl's night, asking if I needed a ride home. Now, that freedom felt like a double-edged sword. I could go out with friends, plan impromptu trips, or stay out late without his questions, but the thrill of independence soured quickly. The absence of his care left me exposed, like a house with its windows shattered. I missed the weight of his arm around me in a crowded bar, the way he'd steer me through a sea of strangers, his presence a quiet promise of safety. One night, I came home from a friend's birthday party, my head buzzing from one too many glasses of wine. The apartment was dark, save for a single light in the living room where Nathan sat, scrolling through his laptop. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him, hoping for a spark of the old Nathan. Hey, I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. You didn't text me tonight. Everything okay? He didn't look up. You're a big girl, Rose. You don't need me hovering. His words were calm, but there was an edge to them, a coldness that made my stomach twist. I wanted to argue, to tell him I missed his hovering, but the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, something calculated. He was pulling away, not out of hurt, but with purpose, like a chess player moving pieces into place. I tried to talk to him, to peel back the layers of his silence. Nathan, I'm sorry about what I said. I didn't mean it. You're not weak. You're the strongest person I know. My voice cracked, betraying the desperation I felt. He finally looked at me, his gaze steady, unyielding. Words have weight, Rose, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. You don't get to take them back just because you feel bad. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as he closed his laptop and walked past me to the bedroom. The door clicked shut, a soft sound that felt like a gunshot in my chest. I sank onto the couch, staring at the pile of unwashed dishes in the sink, the clutter of our life mocking me. Had I done this? Had my teasing, my careless words, flipped a switch in him? Or was this something deeper, a resentment he'd been nursing for years? waiting for an excuse to unleash. The next morning, I noticed another change. Nathan used to open the car door for me, a small gesture that always made me smile, a reminder of his care. But when we left for work, he walked ahead, sliding into the driver's seat without a glance. I stood by the passenger door, waiting for a moment that never came, then opened it myself, the action feeling like a surrender. At home, the financial ease we'd shared began to fray. Nathan earned more than I did, and he'd always covered our expenses without complaint: groceries, rent, the occasional shopping spree. Now, he hesitated when I asked for money, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing my worth. "You've got your own paycheck, don't you?" he said once, his tone casual but cutting. I nodded, swallowing the sting, but the shift was clear, the safety net was gone. As the weeks passed, I felt like I was living with a stranger. Nathan's actions, once predictable, became a puzzle I couldn't solve. He wasn't just withdrawing. He was rewriting the rules of our relationship, and I was scrambling to keep up. I started to question myself, replaying that night in my head, wondering if I'd misread him all along. Was this my fault, or had something been simmering in him, waiting for my words to give it life? The uncertainty gnawed at me, a quiet dread that followed me like a shadow. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan wasn't just reacting. He was planning, setting a stage for something I couldn't yet see. The apartment felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every unanswered text, every cold glance from Nathan. I'd wake up each morning hoping to find a trace of the man I loved, the one who'd cook breakfast with a smile, who'd slip his hand into mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. But he was gone, replaced by a shadow who moved through our life with chilling precision. My name is Rose, and I was learning the hard way that words, once spoken, can set traps you don't see until they snap shut. Nathan's withdrawal had become a performance, each act more deliberate than the last. He no longer opened the car door for me, a ritual that had once felt like a vow. He stopped covering my expenses, his wallet closed as tightly as his heart. I'd ask for help with groceries or a bill, my voice small, and he'd tilt his head, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. "You're independent now, Rose," he'd say, his tone smooth, almost mocking. "Didn't you want that?" I'd nod, my throat tight, but the truth was I felt like I was drowning, the financial security we'd shared slipping away like sand through my fingers. I tried to fill the void, to reclaim the spark we'd lost. I'd cook dinner, hoping the scent of his favorite pasta would draw him out, but he'd eat in silence, his fork scraping the plate like a metronome. I'd suggest a movie night, curling up on the couch with a blanket, but he'd claim he was tired, retreating to the bedroom with his laptop. Each rejection was a pinprick, small but cumulative, until my heart felt like a pincushion. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand the old Nathan back, but his calm detachment was a wall I couldn't breach. The loneliness pushed me to the edge, and I started seeking solace elsewhere. It began innocently, a laugh shared with a coworker, a lingering glance from a stranger at a bar. These moments were fleeting, but they fed a hunger I hadn't realized was growing. I craved attention, validation, anything to fill the emptiness Nathan's absence had carved into me. Online, I found it easier to lose myself in conversations with people who didn't know me, who didn't carry the weight of our fractured history. Their compliments, their interest, were like sparks in the dark, brief but warm. I tried to talk to Nathan, to bridge the chasm between us. One night, I cornered him in the living room, my voice trembling with urgency. "Nathan, please, tell me what's wrong. I can't keep living like this." He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old him. But then he spoke, his words sharp and cold. "You're overthinking, Rose. Maybe the problem's with you, not me." His dismissal hit like a slap, leaving me reeling. He'd always been my safe harbor, but now he was gaslighting me, twisting my reality until I doubted my own feelings. The validation I sought outside our relationship became a dangerous temptation. I told myself it was harmless, a flirty text here, a coffee date there, but the line blurred faster than I expected. One night, after another silent dinner with Nathan, I met someone at a friend's party. He was charming, attentive, everything Nathan wasn't anymore. We talked until the early hours, and in a moment of weakness, I crossed a line I swore I'd never cross. It was a single, reckless kiss, but the guilt was immediate, a weight that clung to me like damp cloth. I didn't speak again, but the betrayal was done, etched into my conscience. I couldn't tell Nathan. The thought of his reaction, the pain in his eyes, the finality of his anger, was unbearable. I buried the secret, hoping it would fade, but it festered, coloring every interaction. I'd watch him across the breakfast table, wondering if he could see the truth in my forced smiles. His silence, once a punishment, now felt like a weapon, and I began to suspect he knew more than he let on. There were moments, a glance too knowing, a pause too long, that made my pulse race. Was he waiting for me to confess? Or was he planning something worse? The blow came unexpectedly, a revelation that shattered my fragile hope. At a friend's dinner, someone mentioned Nathan's new house, their words casual, oblivious to the bomb they'd dropped. He got a huge promotion, they said, smiling. Bought a place on the hill. Didn't he tell you? I froze, my wineglass trembling in my hand. A house. A promotion? Nathan and I had dreamed of buying a home together, picking out paint colors in whispered conversations, imagining a life built side by side. The realization that he'd made this decision alone, excluding me from a future we'd planned, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I confronted him that night, my voice shaking with hurt and fury. A house, Nathan? You bought a house and didn't tell me. He leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, almost smug. It's my money, Rose. My choice, I said, his eyes locked on mine. You wanted independence. I'm giving it to you. His words were a taunt, each one a calculated jab. I pressed him, demanding to know why he'd shut me out, but he turned it on me, his voice rising. You disrespected me, Rose. Called me weak, a simp. Why should I keep carrying you? The argument escalated, my desperation clashing with his icy resolve. Then he said it, his voice low, lethal. I know what you did, Rose. I know about him. My blood ran cold, the room tilting as his words sank in. He knew about my infidelity. How? When? I wanted to deny it, to beg for forgiveness, but his gaze held me silent, a predator watching its prey. You broke us, he said, and stormed out. The door slammed, a thunderclap that echoed in my bones. I stood alone in our apartment, the weight of my actions crashing over me. Nathan wasn't just pulling away, he was orchestrating my unraveling, each move a thread in a trap I'd stumbled into. My guilt, my shame, were his leverage now, and I was starting to see the shape of his revenge, not just to leave me, but to make sure I felt the full cost of my betrayal. The game wasn't over, but I was already losing, and the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. The apartment was a tomb, its silence suffocating, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of Nathan's absence. I stood at the window, staring at the city lights blurred by rain, my reflection a ghost in the glass. My name is Rose, and I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, caught in a web Nathan had woven with chilling precision. My careless words had sparked this unraveling, but his response was no mere reaction. It was a calculated campaign to dismantle everything we'd built. And now, with his knowledge of my betrayal hanging between us, I was scrambling to hold on to a relationship that felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I couldn't let go, not yet. Nathan had been my anchor for 5 years, his love a constant I'd taken for granted. Yes, I'd cheated, a single, shameful mistake born of loneliness and neglect, but I believed we could fix this. I had to believe it. I suggested couples therapy, my voice trembling as I pitched it over dinner, the words spilling out between bites of takeout. We can work through this, Nathan, I said, my eyes pleading. We've been through too much to give up now. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady, unreadable. You think therapy can fix what you broke? He asked, his tone low, laced with something that made my skin prickle. But I pushed, begging him to try, and after a long, agonizing pause, he agreed. Not out of hope, I sensed, but as if granting me a final chance to fail. We found a therapist with glowing reviews, a woman whose calm voice promised clarity. I poured my heart into our first session, laying bare my guilt, my fear, my longing to rebuild what we'd lost. I admitted how much I missed Nathan's care, his small gestures, the way he'd open the car door, the dinners he'd cook, the financial support that had kept us afloat. I even brought up my teasing, how I'd called him weak, and how I now saw the weight of those words. But Nathan sat stone-faced, his arms crossed, his silence a weapon. When the therapist asked about his feelings, he shrugged, his voice flat. She disrespected me, made me feel like less of a man. What's there to say? The therapist turned to me, her eyes kind but probing. Rose, Nathan's feelings are valid. It's okay for him to be hurt, just as it's okay for you to express yours. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, but Nathan's expression didn't soften. He was there, but not really, his mind elsewhere, his heart locked away. We left the session with homework, communicate openly, rebuild trust. But at home, Nathan's distance only grew. I'd planned special nights, candlelit dinners, a movie he loved, but he'd brush them off, claiming work or exhaustion. Once, we argued about money. I asked for help with a bill, my voice small, and he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You wanted independence, Rose. Figure it out. The therapy sessions continued, but they were a battlefield. Nathan opened up, but not in the way I'd hoped. He spoke of the years he'd carried our relationship, shouldering chores, finances, my emotional needs. I gave everything, he said, his voice steady but laced with venom. And she called me weak, a simp. Then she cheated. The word landed like a guillotine, and I froze, my breath catching. The therapist's eyes widened, but she stayed neutral, guiding us to explore the pain. I apologized, tears streaming, but Nathan's gaze was cold, unforgiving. You don't get to cry your way out of this, he said, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. In our final session, Nathan dropped the bomb. He leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice calm but final. I'm done, Rose. I've been fixing up the house I bought. It's ready now, and I'm moving out. My heart stopped, the room spinning as his words sank in. The house, our dream, or so I'd thought, was his alone, a future he'd built without me. I panicked, my mind racing with the practical realities. I relied on Nathan financially. My job barely covered my share of the rent. Without him, I couldn't afford our apartment. Moving in with my parents wasn't an option. Their house was crowded with my siblings' families. Friends? I had none close enough to take me in. I was trapped, and Nathan knew it. I pleaded with him, my voice breaking. Please, Nathan, don't do this. We can keep trying. Therapy, anything, just don't leave. But his resolve was ironclad. I'm sorry, Rose, he said, but there was no warmth in it. Only a faint trace of regret, like a man closing a book he'd finished reading. He stood, his silhouette framed against the therapist's window, and walked out, leaving me to drown in the wreckage of our life. Desperation took hold. When Nathan came to pack his things, I tried everything. Tears, apologies, even grabbing his arm to stop him. Please stay. I begged, my voice raw. But he shook me off, his eyes flashing with anger. You made your choice, Rose. Now live with it. The finality in his voice was a blade, cutting away any hope I had left. I watched him box up his life, his books, his clothes, the kitchen tools he'd once used to make me smile, and each item felt like a piece of me being taken away. I turned to our mutual friends, hoping they'd intervene. I told them Nathan was leaving, spinning a version of the truth that omitted my infidelity. He's changed, I said, my voice trembling. He's shutting me out. But Nathan had already laid his trap. When our friends pressed him, he revealed my cheating, his words turning them against me. She betrayed him. One friend texted me, her tone dripping with disgust. How could you lie to us? The betrayal stung, but it was Nathan's precision that chilled me. He'd known exactly how to isolate me, to strip away my support. I was alone, cornered by my own mistakes and Nathan's relentless retribution. He hadn't just left me. He'd ensured I'd feel the full weight of my actions, a punishment crafted with the same care he'd once shown in loving me. And as I stood in our half-empty apartment, the walls echoing with the life we'd lost, I realized the game wasn't over. Nathan's final move was coming, and I was powerless to stop it. The apartment was a hollow shell, stripped of Nathan's presence, its silence a mocking echo of the life we'd once shared. I stood in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, the air thick with the scent of dust and despair. My name is Rose, and I was at the end of a road I'd paved with my own mistakes. A single jest, a careless taunt about Nathan's strength, had unraveled 5 years of love, and his response, a meticulously crafted revenge, had left me with nothing but the wreckage of my choices. Now, as the walls of his trap closed in, I faced a reality I could no longer escape. I tried everything to hold on to Nathan, to salvage the relationship that had been my anchor. I'd begged, pleaded, poured my heart into therapy sessions that only widened the chasm between us. But Nathan's resolve was unshakable, his departure a calculated act that left me grasping at shadows. When he packed his belongings, each item he took, his favorite mug, the jacket I'd bought him, felt like a theft of my own identity. I'd reached out to our friends, hoping their voices could sway him, but Nathan had already turned them against me, revealing my infidelity with surgical precision. Their messages burned with betrayal. How could you cheat? You lied to us. I was alone, my support network shredded by the truth I'd tried to hide. In a final act of desperation, I turned to our families. I called my parents, my voice cracking as I begged them to talk to Nathan, to convince him to reconsider or at least help me cover the rent until I could stand on my own. I painted a picture of a relationship strained but salvageable, omitting the full weight of my betrayal. Then I reached out to Nathan's parents, hoping their affection for me would soften his heart. But Nathan had been one step ahead. Whatever he told them, likely the unvarnished truth, turned them against me. My mother's voice was cold when she called back. "Rose, you brought this on yourself," she said, her words ablade. "Nathan deserves better." Nathan's parents were even harsher, their message curt: "Leave him alone." The rejection was a gut punch, but I couldn't stop. I texted Nathan, pouring out apologies, promising to change, to be the partner he deserved. His response was a single line: "You're trying to ruin me, Rose." Any sympathy I had is gone. The words seared into me, a final nail in the coffin of our love. In a haze of panic, I went to his workplace, standing outside his office in the rain, hoping to catch him, to make him see me. But he emerged with a security guard, his face a mask of cold fury. "Come here again, and I'll get a restraining order," he said, his voice low, lethal. I stumbled back, the pavement slick beneath my feet, realizing he meant it. 5 years, and he was ready to erase me completely. The reality of my situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. My job, a low-paying gig in a field I loved but couldn't live on, left me no buffer. The rent for our apartment was astronomical, a burden Nathan had carried without complaint. Now, with him gone, I couldn't afford it. My parents' house was no refuge, packed with my siblings and their families, no room for me. Friends who might have helped had turned their backs. Their loyalty shifted to Nathan after his revelation. I was adrift, broke, and alone, the weight of my infidelity a chain around my neck. Social media became my last outlet, a place to vent, to seek advice, to find some shred of understanding. I posted my story online, hoping for support, but the response was a firestorm. Strangers called me delusional, narcissistic, a villain who'd painted Nathan as the bad guy to dodge accountability. "You cheated, and you expect sympathy?" One comment read. I'd have gotten a restraining order too. The hate was relentless, each message a mirror reflecting my shame. Even those who offered advice, suggesting therapy, financial independence, couldn't soften the truth. I'd lost everything, and the world saw me as the architect of my own ruin. The final days in the apartment were a blur of desperation. I scoured roommate listings, but the housing crisis in our city made it impossible to find someone in time. My last paycheck was gone, spent on bills and groceries, and the next was weeks away. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink where Nathan used to wash dishes, humming softly, his love a quiet constant. Now, the silence was a scream, a reminder of what I'd thrown away. I'd mocked him as weak, but it was me who was crumbling, unable to stand without the support he'd once given so freely. As the deadline for next month's rent loomed, I faced an undeniable truth. I couldn't stay. The apartment, our home, was a monument to my failure. Too expensive, too empty. I packed what I could, my hands shaking as I folded clothes, each item a memory of a life I'd lost. Nathan's trap had been perfect, not just leaving me, but ensuring I'd feel the full weight of my actions, stripped of love, friends, and stability. He'd moved on, to his new house, his new life, while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. I don't know what comes next. The future is a dark, uncharted sea, and I'm sailing it alone. Maybe I'll find a way to rebuild, to learn from the mistakes that brought me here. But as I closed the door on our apartment for the last time, the lock clicking shut with finality, I can't shake the feeling that Nathan's revenge wasn't just about leaving. It was about making sure I'd never forget the cost of my words. A jest, a moment of carelessness, had burned my world to ash, and all I could do was step into the unknown, carrying the weight of my regret.